Good evening and welcome to Saving Liberty. My name is Tyler Zagari. Tonight I am joined by Elizabeth Hayes, who is the North American Leadership Manager of Students for Liberty. Thank you for joining me, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me here, Tyler.
Before we jump into our topic, I want to remind you all that we are broadcasting live, so make sure to leave your comments and questions in the chat. On Wednesday, November 15th, Senators John Cornyn and Chris Murphy introduced bipartisan legislation to strengthen the National Instant Criminal Search Background Check System, or NICS for short, in hopes to improve background checks for gun sales. On Thursday, Cornyn stated that for years, agencies and states haven't complied with the law, failing to upload these critical records without consequence. And experts agree that this legislation has the best chance of any effort to pass through Congress in recent years. It has the weight of support from senior Senate Republicans, and there is no public opposition from the gun lobby. This is the third attempt to fix the background check reporting system since 1995. The NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007 provided millions of dollars to encourage states to improve their data sharing, and that was preceded by the National Criminal History Improvement Program, which was the first effort to give the states an incentive to report more records. This new legislation comes in the wake of recent massacres, such as in Texas. In that case, the shooter should have been denied the purchase of a firearm. The shooter's name should have been entered in NICS, but the Special Investigations Office at Holloman Air Force Base failed to transmit the domestic violence charges. Federal law prohibits anyone convicted of domestic violence from getting access to firearms. Now, if proper procedure would have been followed, we may not have seen such a horrific massacre. So, Elizabeth, help me understand what's going on here.
Well, it's very interesting. You know, in light of these very unfortunate tragedies that have taken place in Texas and California, Las Vegas, we need a bill like this to really help fix the bill that should have already been in place. And unfortunately, these policies have fallen through, and the gunman's name should have been in the system, but it was failed to be reported, and that's a problem.
That is a major problem. Now, my question is, will this bill be seen as an overreach of the federal government?
I don't think so. I mean, some might argue absolutely yes, it will be an overreach. I think some will argue any bill is an overreach of federal government. However, I think this is one that is required because it's going to protect others from tragedies like this.
Okay. Now, with the NRA, not publicly opposing it, do you think that gun owners are going to see this as an infringement, a further infringement on their rights, like further gun control, or do you think they're going to be more open and receptive to it, since it is a bipartisan bill from both a Democrat and a Republican?
I think they're going to be more receptive to it. It is a bipartisan bill. We're seeing support from Republican senators, liberal senators in California, and we're seeing that it's really, again, just fixing a policy that was already in place that somehow was not being upheld. So really, I see this bill as an incentive structure for gun owners and those selling firearms to make sure that this policy and law is upheld.
Now, let's say gun owners embrace it with arms wide open. Do you think that this will help give gun owners, a better name in our political landscape nowadays, where if you have a gun, you're automatically assumed to be a liability or a risk to society? Do you think that by accepting this piece of legislation and wanting to further strengthen NICS, that it will help give gun owners a better name? I
absolutely think that is true. I think it's going to provide an opportunity for gun owners to say that we're not just here to, have guns and go out and shoot them. You're right, and you should be able to do that, of course. But I think for those who are concerned about guns and gun owners and what that could entail, I think it's going to ease their mind and give them a sense of ease and peace to know that these systems are in place and they are being upheld.
I think that with this bill, it's going to give the American people, especially non-gun owners, a better understanding of what NICS is like, because there's so many red flags that can go up in your background check, even spelling your address wrong and you're automatically denied. When I applied for one at Cabela's in Delaware, I put my address wrong, and they were like, nope, you gotta wait, come back the next day and do it again. So I think by this bill, it'll give Americans a better insight into what NICS is like.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, again, it's just going to ease their mind on these systems are in place, but it's just making sure that they are being followed. If getting a gun is it can be challenging, especially in some states. You know, if you're in New York, California, Massachusetts.
10-day waiting period?
Yeah, it's going to be much more difficult. But luckily for those of us in Virginia or in other states, it's not as difficult for us to get those guns if we go through the right and appropriate processes.
That's something I never understood, the mandatory waiting period. You know, if someone wants to go out and do something crazy, they're going to do it. They're not going to wait 10 days to do it. But, you know, we won't get into that. I'm going to switch kind of gears here. You did mention California. And we did have the California massacre recently. Thankfully, the school was on lockdown and no children were killed. Mm-hmm. You know, it's always a heartbreak to see children that are injured by, you know, the sickos of this world. So the shooter, he goes out, he starts shooting up people, he goes back home, kills his wife, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if she had been armed, do you think that she would have been able to stop him or, you know, saved her own life?
You know, no one can say for certain yes or no there, right? I do think that if she had a firearm, she would have had a better opportunity to defend herself. And I think that was an opportunity that, unfortunately, you know, was not available for her at the time. But I think guns are a great equalizer for women. When we're put in these situations, you know, it's easier for us to have a firearm and be able to defend ourselves appropriately. If we don't have that right, don't have the opportunity, you know, things can get, you know, tragic very quickly, like we saw in California.
So would you say then that the best way for women to defend themselves is with a firearm?
I think in certain circumstances, absolutely. I think, again, it is the great equalizer. If that is something that is going to get rid of the asymmetrical problems that we see between men and women physically, if a woman is going to be dominated just out of pure size, to have a method to appropriately defend yourself, I think it's of course you're right, and you should be able to use that whenever and wherever you need to. So
going back to the mandatory waiting period, you know, I think that if, you know, a wife, a spouse, a girlfriend, or whoever, you know, is facing some type of abuse, or they know that their significant other is going to, you know, try to harm them, and then you have, you know, oh, I want a gun to defend myself. You know, go to the gun store, oh, sorry, you got to wait 10 days to get your firearm. And it's too late. So do you think that we should, you know, I mean, a possibility down the road could be getting rid of the mandatory waiting periods?
I think absolutely. I mean, I think that is a step in the right direction. Again, as long as we have these processes in place are being upheld to make sure those who should not have guns do not get access to do heinous acts like we've saw in California and elsewhere, unfortunately.
I think it'd be interesting to see how domestic abuses or crimes, you know, change if we were to get rid of these mandatory waiting periods, because, you know, gun supporters, you know, think it's this huge violation of their constitutional rights, which, you know, I completely agree with. However, you have the gun grabbers that are saying, well, you know, these periods of waiting stop crime, and the statistics just aren't on their side.
Yeah.
They don't stop crime at all.
Yeah. I think the black market really proves that as well, too. I mean, the 10-day waiting period, you can wait 10 days, or you could easily go on the black market and find a firearm if you needed to. But that's not, I mean, we need to abide by the gun laws that we have, you know, I think, to demonstrate that gun owners are responsible and respected. And so I don't recommend going to the black market and doing that. But I think that shows that these gun laws are not as effective as we hope they would be.
And you said respect, you know, gun owners want to show the public that we're, you know, upstanding citizens, we're responsible. So that brings me to Campus Carry with college students. You know, they're out there having, you know, wild parties. You know, they're doing stupid things like college kids do. You know, I was a perfect college student, believe me.
I'm sure you were, yeah.
So then one of the common arguments from the gun control side is, well, what I just said, you know, college students are out there partying, they're drinking, but there hasn't been an instant, to my knowledge at least, where a student has, you know, had an incident like that.
Yeah, it's really quite the opposite, actually, which is the unfortunate side of Campus Carry right now. Is there is not an appropriate way for women or individuals, frankly, on campuses to defend themselves. Campus Carry is not allowed on almost any campus. You're also not allowed to have pepper spray, mace, like 3-inch blades, anything to defend yourself. It's not just firearms, it's anything. And it's perpetuating a cycle of victimhood on these college campuses. Yes. It's becoming more and more problematic.
You know, I'm willing to go as far as to say that these administrators care more about their federal funding for their, awareness programs to prevent rape, when in reality they're doing nothing to stop it. I mean, okay, yeah, we brag about our blue lights, we brag about our police force, but what I like to see is, I would like to see a study done on the average response time on these blue lights, because I've looked into campus aggravated assaults, campus rapes. I mean, for example, Harvard University last year had 35 rapes on campus, and you look at all these other colleges that are having these problems, aggravated assault, rape, robbery. You would think that these administrators would get it through their thick skulls that clearly the blue lights aren't saving us. And you mentioned pepper spray too. Pepper spray is heavily restricted on college campuses. Yeah. And in most states, if they allow it on campus, they say, oh, you got to keep it in your book bag. But,
Yeah, the solution that I've seen from administrators to the rape crisis and sexual assault crisis that we've seen on college campuses is really to provide a safe space and put a Band-Aid over the problem and say, here, come tell us about your feelings and tell us why you're upset, as opposed to fixing and implementing a solution that works and making sure that students have the appropriate needs and resources to defend themselves if needed.
No, they don't care about the students. They care about filling their pockets with tax dollars and federal grants. And Harvard, again, over $20 billion in federal grant money, and they have one of the highest rape rates on campuses. I mean, the administrators just care about filling their pockets with money. They don't care about the students. And something needs to be done where we get on college campuses, we get rid of pepper spray bans completely, at least start there, because I think it's going to take a heck of a lot of a strong movement to ever get campus carry on in a state like California or New York or one of these extremely far leftist states. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and that's why I'm grateful for organizations like the Second Amendment Institute or Empowered that Antonio Okafor is running, or Students for Concealed Carry or Students for Self-Defense. These organizations are all really on the forefront on college campuses, advocating to repeal these policies that go against our Second Amendment rights and are allowing students to have the right to defend themselves if needed.
I think the real issue is with campus carry is that students, a lot of students aren't comfortable with it. And I think we need to take it state by state basis and say, okay, how does this campus feel about campus carry? We got to look at the state law, we got to look at the school law. And it's absurd. I mean, at least open carry or concealed carry is just a way for students to defend themselves. But they worry about how the students feel about it, because you're going to have let's say 10% of the student population that wants concealed carry, and then 90% are saying, oh, we don't want it. So where do we make that bridge, make that gap? How do we get that 90% of students to come over for concealed carry on campus?
I think a lot of it is education-based. I think there's a stigma, if you will, around guns, especially recently given the unfortunate massacres that have happened. So I think a lot of it is education-based in making sure that people understand how to properly use firearms and feel safe around them. I think that's going to be a big solution in moving the needle forward in this issue area.
I mean, I really think that with everything going on nowadays, these shootings, terrific, horrific shootings. We have, California, we have Texas, Las Vegas. You would think that students want to be arming themselves to protect themselves. So if some wacko comes onto campus, police show up after the fact. Oh, a guy comes onto campus with a gun. Oh, hold on, let me press the blue light and wait for 5 minutes till the cops show up. Why not, be prepared and have your firearm ready to go.
Right. Gun-free zones are honestly laughable. It's like, hey, let's just put a target on our back and say, we're not going to be able to defend ourselves. Like, what are you going to do?
It's like the drug-free zones. Like, oh, this school is a drug-free zone.
It's like, I guarantee it's not.
Absolutely. And as you said before, with the black market, the more rules and restrictions placed on a certain, if you want to call it contraband or item, the more the black market increases. University of Delaware, they don't allow guns on campus, and when I was there, I ran Students for the Second Amendment, brought in Katie Pavlich, we got money for ammo, and I guarantee you there were students concealed carrying on that campus, licensed by the state. I have, my concealed carry for Delaware, Pennsylvania, working on DC, fingers crossed, living in the swamp, you know,
Yeah.
crime rampant.
Right.
It's just horrible. But especially colleges in high crime areas, you know, students do have the right to defend themselves on campus, and these schools are restricting that right.
Absolutely. Another thing too that I think will help us move the needle forward, one thing that we've done at Students for Liberty is some of our campus coordinators, we had a group in Montana that did this, is they brought a group out to a gun range out in Montana and just shot a bunch of cans and hay bales and taught them how to use guns. And I thought that was a really great way to demonstrate, A, it's fun to shoot guns, but to do it in a way that is appropriate and safe, and just build that rapport with them and the machinery, and then also just kind of melt down that stigma around it.
It's like, you know, fire or a stove. You know, you got to respect it. You got to understand how
Right.
it works. And then once I think a lot of this, you know, gun control talk from students, you know, anti-Second Amendment friendly, is they're scared of guns, which, you know, they have every right to be. I understand it. But like you said, you take them out, you bring them to the range, you teach them how to use them. I haven't had one person, not like, well, two people friends from England, but, you know, that's a whole completely different country.
Right.
You bring them out to the range, you go shooting, you know, machine gun shoots are fun too. You go out with 100 people and you go shoot the big guns. And I think if you start them off slowly, you say, okay, you know, this is your constitutional right. You have the constitutional right to the Second Amendment, to keep and bear arms. I mean, the Heller decision was very clear. It's an individual right the government can't take away. So I think that if we introduce students slowly to it, bring them out to the range, bring, you know, a certified instructor out, teach them how to shoot it, you know, I think they'll become more accustomed to it, more comfortable with them, and willing to come over to the Second Amendment side.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we need to do more of those kinds of activities to just get more exposure with young people and guns. I mean, with great power comes great responsibility, and I think this is also true with
Spider-Man,
firearms.
right?
Exactly.
Uncle Ben?
Yeah.
Wait, now he said that in the movie. Did he also say that in the comic?
That I don't know, unfortunately.
I'm not a comic buff.
I'm not either. I wish I was.
If someone
but-
watching is a comic buff, I hope
yeah,
they
let
comment.
us know,
Let us
please.
know.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of campus work.
Yes.
How many campuses would you say you've been to?
Oh, countless of campuses. With Students for Liberty, I have the distinct pleasure of overseeing our operations in the United States and Canada, so our good old Canadian friends. And we have currently over 250 campus coordinators that are all over North America for us. So we have a very wide reach on college campuses right now. It's very interesting to see the diverse reactions from the different demographics on their campuses in response to a lot of these issues like guns or free speech and issues like those.
So free speech, that's a fun one nowadays.
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the free speech zones. Now, you know, obviously public universities, publicly funded, have to adhere to, you know, state law. So in essence, the entire campus is a free speech zone. Now, have you encountered a public university that has designated free speech zones?
Oh, absolutely. I went to one. Yeah, so I went to the University of Iowa, and we fought tooth and nail to get these speech codes revised, and specifically the free speech zone. Free speech zones are tricky. It sounds like, oh, it's a zone for free speech. No. It's a zone that they're restricting your free speech to, and that's the problem. In America, we have the First Amendment. So technically, all of America should be a free speech zone, in my opinion. But especially at these public universities that are accepting taxpayer money, they are legally bound to uphold the First Amendment. And we see time and time again these universities and administrations not do that. And that's when we get to have fun and try to sue the university, bring in organizations like the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education.
FIRE.
Yep, FIRE. Young Americans for Liberty is also very great on this issue. And really just moving the needle forward on getting these ridiculous policies repealed and making sure students have their First Amendment rights on campus.
So do you guys ever do like free speech police and write citations to students?
That is my favorite, actually. I don't
Okay.
know if this is going to date me, but Reno 911 used to be a Comedy Central show where they would wear ridiculous short shorts and police outfits, and we'll have our students go out and dress like them and just write silly citations to kids on campus for talking too loudly or expressing an opinion outside of the free speech zone. And that's a great way to engage the students and just kind of educate them on the ridiculous policies that their schools are enforcing.
Yeah, and one thing that really bugs me is when organizations like, let's say, Turning Point, SFL, Young Americans for Liberty, put up signs on campus, and then students have the audacity to come up and tear down the signs. I watched a video yesterday on Campus Reform where they were on, they got the students recorded tearing down the signs, and the cop comes over, he says, yeah, it's destruction of property. And the girl's like, oh, well, if you're writing me a citation, I want a receipt. And the cop literally goes, oh, God, you want to do it this way? He's like, all right, well, step over to my car, we'll have a nice little chat. I mean, where are these students getting these ridiculous notions that they have a right to infringe upon other students' free speech and destroy
Right.
property?
Right. The First Amendment does not protect your feelings. And I think that is what a lot of college students today are not realizing.
They wear their safety pins.
Exactly. And, people should have a place to, feel safe, but a college campus is a place for intellectual learning and discourse. And if you're not able to engage in that, then perhaps that's not an environment where you should be.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I like what you said there. Reminds me of maybe one of two things that President Obama said that I actually liked is in an interview or a town hall near the end of his second term, he said, college campuses are a place to learn. You should have open discourse, you should discuss your differences and come to a, common ground solution. And if you're not willing to do that, and if these, far left students aren't even, willing to listen to who they claim to be the best president ever, where is the line drawn where they, they actually have rational discussions and have rational, talks about what's going on campus?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too. I mean, it's the students, but a lot of it is the administration. They're the ones who are writing these policies to restrict students' free speech. And it's very hypocritical, frankly. These institutions are created for higher learning. They're created to have students intellectually explore different ideas and, embrace new ideas. And unfortunately, when they restrict the content that's being able to be discussed, they are doing their students a disservice.
The campus administrators care about the campus administrators. They want to, appease those on the radical left or, anyone that's going to give them money. And they'd be like, oh, we have free speech spaces, we have, we promise your feelings won't be hurt, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I think it's, making the snowflakes even flakier. And the students are coming to college now, where it used to be you come to college, you learn, you get your degree. Now students are having the idea, oh, this is where I can freely express myself and trample on the rights of other students.
Right.
So it's increasing every year. It's getting worse and worse. It's like a snowball effect. The snowflakes are building the snowball. So what's going to happen if it's not stopped?
I think free speech is such a forefront issue right now for a lot of organizations. And if you look at Berkeley and what continues to happen there when they bring controversial speakers, at Yale, we saw it. At Vassar College in New York, we've seen time and time again, if you bring a speaker who, frankly, triggers those maybe who are more left-leaning, there's a huge outcry on campus. But when somebody brings somebody who's more left-leaning, it's a non-issue. I don't see conservative students or libertarian students, freaking out over the fact that a very left-leaning person is speaking on campus. But when you reverse that role, it's totally the opposite, which I think is a huge issue.
Yeah, especially with speakers like Milo Yiannopoulos and Ben Shapiro.
Right.
Come on, at least Ben Shapiro, he's well-spoken, he respects everyone. Same with Milo. When he goes to, has people question him, he respects them, he lets them get their questions out.
I disagree with you on Milo a little bit there, but to each their own.
From the movies I've seen, I'm not saying that, I'm a huge fan of either of theirs or I dislike them. I'm just, stating from what I've seen on YouTube, because we believe everything that's on the internet.
Of course.
Of course.
It's all factual.
Google's my #1 go-to place. But, for example, Ben Shapiro, I forget which college it was, brought him about a month ago. And then the school said, oh, you got to pay a $300,000 security fee.
Right. Right. And that's another way that administrations are censoring students and restricting their speech is through these security fees. And again, a lot of it comes down to viewpoint discrimination, which I was kind of hinting at a little bit earlier, when they kind of play like these party politics in a sense, and the conservative speakers that come on campus are not allowed, but the left-leaning speakers that come to campus come in with a breeze, are welcomed, if you will. And what happens is, like you just said, they'll implement these ridiculous security fees that often are thousands of dollars and implemented last minute for these students because they're worried about potential backlash from students on campus. So these security fees are being paid or are being used to pay for like police or security and things of that nature to ensure that there aren't protests.
You know, if the school wants a security presence, if they want metal detectors, police, whatever, they should pay for it. If the student, there should be an option where students can waive out of that. You know, let them provide their own security. You know, why not?
Right.
When I brought in Katie Pavlich to UD, I said to the chief of police, I was like, look, we got this. But he was gracious enough to give us, 20 police officers and magnetometers, and
Right.
so that was nice of him. But it's just, where's the line drawn?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of these college students are already paying ridiculous amounts of fees in their tuition for things like this, but yet they're tacking it on additionally in the name of free speech, which I think is just very unfortunate for these institutions to do.
Exactly. Well, I think that's all we have time for tonight.
Thank you.
I appreciate you joining us.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you all for joining us tonight. And make sure to look out for our next episode. You'll love our guest speaker. Good night, America.